dream again. Please don't give up on your future.
Welcome to another episode of Life Interrupts Us, the podcast. I'm your storyteller, Stephen Wayne. And today, I'm going to pick up where I left off. This season, season 2, we're focusing on the journey of the creatives. Now, I've got a whole handful of friends that are falling through in this season. Some Grammy Award winners, some big names in underground hip hop, um, movie stars, or people who've been in movies, in memorable movies. But a part of that journey is also a part of my journey because, like I said in the other episode, I am a creative singer, songwriter, producer, author. I'm a creator. And oddly enough, at one point in my life, I was a dance choreographer. Yeah, I know. You're looking at this body going, no, you wasn't. Those of you who knew me back then, yes, I was. But today I want to continue on talking about my music development, my music journey. Because in this season, I'm going to take an episode and talk about the various aspects of my creative journey so that you get to know me real well. Where we left off with the last episode from me was about my high school journey and the developmental stages of my music or music career or whatever you want to call it. You know, it was, I heard Howard Hewitt once say, if you're not getting paid on a regular basis for doing something, it's not a career. um, how often is he performing? No, shout out to Howard Hewitt. Maybe he's retired. So where I left off was me coming out of high school and with a grand finale, a big bang about my performance with my choir that I was in. So when I graduated from high school, New Edition was the big thing. There, there Michael Jackson was Michael Jackson, but New Edition, they were kids. They were our age, and I grew up in the '80s, so you had Ready for the World, you had Expose, you had a bunch of family groups. Um, shoot, the '80s was popping with music, but music of all genres. You had shoot, pop, R&B, hip hop had found its way to the main stage, but there were still the greats. Luther Vandross was the great, um, and but New Edition, they were the ones. They held everybody's attention. They held every teenage girl's attention. And I remember while I was in high school, I remember um, one of my friends saying, "You can't, you ain't as good as New Edition." I was like, "Girl, please, I'll sing all of them," which was true. I could. But leaving high school, that conversation left an impression on my mind. It's like, okay, so what you gonna do with it? Well, the '80s was a different time. There was no such thing as digital studios. Very few people had home studios. And if they did, they were loaded with equipment up and down the walls. Um, and like I said before, I came from a family of singers. My mom, her sister, and brother were the Phillips singers. So um, I thought I would cut my teeth with them. And so several things happened simultaneously. So I started doing hair. I left UCLA, started doing hair. And my mentor was a nationwide well-known hairstylist. She was like the queen of the game at that time. Everybody knew her from state to state. She was a big deal. Shout out to Doris Mosley. Um, but Doris was a hairstylist by day and by night. But then when the shop was closed, Doris was a clubber. She hung out real tough at the clubs. And not the clubs that we hung out at, because I hung out at Paradise 24 and um, Electric Circus and Kiss the Club in Orange County. Doris hung out at Mavericks Flat, the Pied Piper, Marla's Memory Lane. Now, Marla's Memory Lane was owned by Marla Gibbs from the Jeffersons. And Doris was and still is Marla's hairstylist. So we used to hang out there. Now, all of these clubs were 21 and older, but that never stopped me. I always knew everybody. So I don't even remember paying to get in clubs. We had to hook up everywhere we went, me and my crew, everywhere we went. But at Marla's had live music. And Doris knew that I could sing because by that time, I had started becoming the wedding singer. So people would book me to sing in their weddings because they wanted, um, oh, so long for this night I prayed that a star. They wanted Ribbon in the Sky and they wanted Luther Vandross. That's what they wanted. They wanted Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack. They wanted Billy Preston or not Billy Preston, but um, what was the name? Woman, don't you know with you I'm born again? You know, they wanted all that. And so Doris got to see me sing at a lot of weddings. And she she was my mom's best friend. Still is. So she said, "Come on, Steve, we're gonna go to Marla's." I'm like, Marla's, what's Marla's? Because I was working at her salon, and Marla's, I would find out, was Marla's Memory Lane over in Lamert Park. Historic. So we go to the club. It's small. It's dark. I mean, like real dark inside. Um, but it's banging. People everywhere. You got the Nation of Islam at the door. Hey, Sister Doris, how you doing? You know, they all knew her. So me walking in with her, I might as well have been walking in with the president. Because as soon as they learned my name, every time I would go there, hey, Brother Steve, what's up, brother? You gonna bless us tonight? You gonna sing tonight? Because the first time I went and hung out there, Doris told the MC, whose name was Muhammad. Muhammad was the MC. He was hilarious. He was a Muslim via the Nation of Islam, but he was also a really good singer. But he sounded just like Lou Rawls. So when the crowd would request it, you'll never find. He would kill that song. I mean, like destroy it. He would put Lou Rawls to shame. The boy was so bad with it, but he sounded just like him. So if you close your eyes, you'd think Lou Rawls was there. And so we go in, we hanging out, and then Doris says, "Steve, go up there and sing." I'm like, "No, I ain't going up there to do no singing. What?" And it wasn't that I was shy because I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that that's what they was doing in there. You know, they had dances, they had a DJ and all that, but it was people chilling, eating little finger foods, appetizers, having a lot of drinks. Doris didn't drink, um, and I did. She didn't. I wasn't even supposed to be drinking. I wasn't even old enough to drink, but I drank. Um, and we'd be in there just chilling, just talking and meeting people. And I met the girl who played Nettie in Color Purple, the original Color Purple, Celia Nettie. Me and you will never part, my key, da, da. Yeah, I met her. She's a princess, like a real princess from Africa. Um, she was really sweet. I met Hoppo. He and I became friends. Um, he he does a lot of stuff in the music world now and video and all that kind of stuff. Um, Fast forward several years later, I'm singing at a wedding and he's doing the videography for it. Hilarious. Um, And I met people. I met Billy Preston there. I just met all kind of people because it was a dive. People used to hang. So when Doris says, "Hey, I set it up. They're gonna call you." What? What? And so what happens is because certain nights were open mic night, and you get on a list or whatever. I didn't put my name on no list, so I didn't have no performance name. I didn't have nothing. I was just Steven, you know, Stephen Phillips or Steve Phillips, because that's what I was, but Steve Phillips. It would later become SP and then it would become Stephen Wayne, which is what a lot of people know me by now. Um, so they call my name. And how it works is you go up, you tell the musician what you want, the keyboard player, and then he'll tell the band real quick. And you couldn't pick nothing that was just random. You had to pick something that, was known. Man, I picked I want to say I picked something from Luther Vandross. Um, so amazing, I think it was, or House is Not a Home, one of the two, And I sang that song. Well, I was 19. Crowd went crazy. And I was in my own mind. I was like, "A Star Is Born." I would go on to become a regular at Marla's. So much so that me and my friends, none of us were 20, 21, would go there and hang out on different nights because some nights they didn't have no live entertainment. It was just all DJing and dancing or whatever. And, I used to like to date older women. So we go in there and clown and meet older women and whatever. Um, but I became a regular. I never paid. As soon as Tony Muhammad would be at the door, as soon as he saw me, "Hey brother, what's going on? Come on, it's your cool. Come on in." I never paid to get in there. It became my safe haven for for both singing and for just chilling and being in the cut. It was different than the young clubs that I hung out at because the young clubs, first of all, there were many nights um, where you had to run out because somebody didn't talk about their shooting, fights breaking out inside or right outside. Uh, you had all of that, and then you had youthful spirit. Young people, immature, jumping around, being silly. Me, I was not that guy. I'd be at the club chilling. Like I said, I was a dance choreographer at that during that time, but so I was I was into the groove. I was grooving. I came there to dance. I didn't even go to the clubs to meet girls. But when I would go to Marla's, different story. I would go there on those off nights when it was just a club night and no live music. I would go there to hang out and to meet women, not girls, women. Different story. Um, so I became such a regular that another regular at the time was LV. LV was with the guy that sang Gangsta's Paradise. LV had cane. He'd walk in there because he had been shot or something. Something happened to his leg. Me and him became real cool, and we both were the Luther guys. We would do all of Luther's stuff, and it would be so much so he'd be like, "Hey, Steve, what you doing tonight?" I'm like, I'm gonna do this." He's like, "What you doing?" "Oh, I'm gonna do that." "Okay, cool, we cool." Because both of us could sing, but both of us we didn't want to step on one another's toes. But there was another guy that used to hang out at Marla's. His name was Bobby Ross, or Bobby Rose. I'm sorry, not Bobby Ross Avila. Bobby Rose. Bobby Rose was a member of the Rose Brothers. They were a Temptation, uh, Four Tops, Temptation, Spinners type group in the 70s and 80s that never really made it, but they still performed locally. They had a little local following. And Bobby used to always talk to me. We would spend time talking outside, inside the club. And one day he said something to me that just stuck with me. He said, "Steve, you shouldn't be here, man." Now I'm thinking he's talking about my age and, legally I'm not supposed to be in here. He said, "Your voice is above all this." see all this because back then you could smoke in the club, so people in there smoking and drinking, and he said, he said you got a golden sound. I had heard that before. I'd heard that in church, and he said, man, you should be recording and trying to be a star, man. This is a place where people come after they tried and failed. I was like, wow, the great Bobby Rose is telling me I should go be a star. When Bobby Rose told me that, I stopped singing at Marla's. I would still go hang out. And I would hang out because they had multiple nights where live entertainment. But I would hang out in such a way that on other nights where it wasn't open mic, they would see me there and ask me to sing. And so sometimes I would, but most times I wouldn't. But after that conversation with Bobby Rose, I stopped. I would still go and hang out, but I wouldn't sing anymore because he had me thinking about it. So I was like, okay, all right. So then what does that mean? I need to get me a record deal. Now, that's where it gets tough. In the 80s, record deals were almost impossible to get. Unless someone discovered you and took you to the label, you could go do 10 demos if you wanted. You can get meetings with the labels. I got all kind of meetings: Motown, Sony, MCA, Columbia, Warner Brothers. I got all kind of meetings. It never materialized to anything because the record industry, the record label industry, it's a very interesting circle, very tight circle. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was I was this young kid who could really sing. Um, let me take it back real quick. So while I was still hanging out at Marla's, one of my associates that hung out there, I kind of dated this girl there, and she hung out with a crew of a bunch of strange people. But one of the guys in that group, he would always get up and sing as well. And he'd go through all these antics, almost Patti LaBelle like antics, and he would sing Patti LaBelle songs sometimes, but he couldn't really sing. He'd be trying to do these runs and it wouldn't land right, and we're like, why you always trying to do that? And then he disappeared. We didn't see him for months, maybe 6 or 8 months, because I hung out at Marla's for a couple of years. So he comes back, and we're at the club chilling, and he sees me. Hey, Steve, what's up? And he looks like he's got a little different flair to him, like something's happened to him. Like, hey, man, where you been? His name was Anthony. Anthony, where you been? He's like, oh, man, I've been on the road with Mickey Howard. I was like, what? Oh, that's dope. While that fool was on the road, that nigga learned how to sing. It made me think about the fact that you could be a good basketball player, but if you train with better basketball players, you don't really have no choice but to become better. You pick up some of their moves, kind of do some of their stuff. Singing is the same way. Now, there are still limits as it pertains to what your voice can physically do, but even that limit can be pushed. I was in shock. He got up and killed Marlos. I didn't even want to sing no more. I was like, wow. Because again, at that time, I was the Luther Vandross specialist. Anything Luther, I could do it. I could do some of Donny Hathaway stuff, but I couldn't do the stuff where Donny did the runs because I hadn't learned how to really, really do that at that time and didn't know that I could do that because I wasn't around that. My family didn't sing like that. They sang real pretty and real golden. But my boy Anthony killed that night. He was doing all kind of runs, and I was like, afterwards, I was like, man, your voice. What did you do? He said, hey, he said, Mickey and her girls, they taught me how to sing, man. He said, they took me on the road with them and really taught me how to sing. I said, well, they did, and you learned it because, boy, you bad. So fast forward, when I stopped singing at Marla's, I first of all, I already knew how to dance. And by now, Bobby Brown had left New Edition and was doing his own thing. So in my mind, I'm saying I can be like Bobby Brown because I could sing better than him and I could dance better than him too. So I met a girl. She was a dancer for Lula Washington, Lula Washington's dance company. Shout out to Lula Washington, Tamika Washington, Kamasi Washington. They all family, and it's crazy because then later on, me and Kamasi will become friends and do all kind of stuff together. But I met this girl. Shout out to Angel Creeks, um, formerly Angel Bates, and she introduces me to her world of modern jazz and ballet and all that kind of thing. And I was already a choreographer at the time. So, but I choreographed urban, they didn't call it hip hop back then, they just called it street dancing. And, and this was during the time, of the Romeos and KODs, the Sex Jerks, and shout out to all those urban groups from back in the 80s. And Angel introduces me to another side of that dance world. And in my mind, I'm going, okay, this is cool. I'm wondering how I could put this music and dance thing together. Bobby Brown is out. So one night, Angel and I are out at the movies and we're seated. And I say, hey, baby, I'm going to go get some popcorn. I'll be right back. You want something? She tells me what she wants. I say, okay, I'll be right back. So I go out into the lobby and into the bathroom. Who's in the bathroom? Bobby Brown. Me and Bobby Brown are the only two dudes in the bathroom. Now, he hadn't become the king of R&B yet. He hadn't become every little step I take. He hadn't become that yet. But he was clearly no longer New Edition. He was Bobby Brown. So I shot my shot. Hey, Bobby Brown, what's up, man? I'm a singer songwriter, man. I wrote this song. Me and my boys, we think it would be dope for you because back in high school, like I said, my boy Lamech, shout out to Lamech Stewart, had the studio, and we wrote this R&B love song called "Would You Love Me." Now, my wife has heard this song in the last year, and she said, baby, you should do that song now because lyrically, the vibe is right. But really, I'm thinking about having my son do it because my youngest son, he's a killer on vocals. And it's kind of for his era, his age group. But at that time, that song wasn't that old. It was only a couple of years old, but it was still relevant for that time period. So I'm like, man. So he said, oh, man, that's what's up, man. Give me your number. Oh, Bobby Brown said, give me your number. But yeah, man, let me get it for da, da, da. I wrote it out. Because back then we always kept a pen. Because you never knew whose number you was gonna need to get. Yes, I had a girlfriend. I wasn't trying to get a number. Angel was fine and all that. But still, um, I had a pen. Gave him my number. Bam. Go back to my seat. Baby, I just met Bobby Brown. She was like, really? I was like, yeah, and I gave him my number. We're gonna talk about this song that me and Lamech wrote. And she was like, oh, that's amazing. I never heard from Bobby Brown. He likely threw my phone number in the trash. Uh, Fast forward years later, and one of his baby's mama. Oh, I'm not gonna get into that. No, I'm not gonna do that to y'all because I have to put too many people out on this one. So I'm not gonna do that. Let's just say that he and I had to connect for another way.
Philip Sharpskills Jacobs, from Los Angeles, California, native, born and raised there. I'm a hip hop artist, I'm a leadership speaker, I'm an author. Mainly, I'm a creative, and I'm excited and passionate about entrepreneurship and helping people realize their full God given potential.
Anyway, almost caught me slipping. Um, so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I can do this. I can do this. But I had not the first clue on what this was. I didn't know anybody in the music industry. Now, Doris had a client and friend who was Luther Vandross' road manager, and she had been talking to her about me, but not in a serious way, because up until that point, I wasn't serious about it. I wasn't like some people who are serious about singing. They everywhere singing. They sing everywhere. They go. I wasn't that guy. It's just that once Bobby Rose said what he said to me, I had this thought like, you can do it, so go after it. But I didn't even know where to start. Um, I had no clue on where to start, and so as quickly as the dream began after meeting Bobby Brown, the dream fizzled. I just focused on the choreography and the dance and stuff and hanging out. And I kept being a wedding singer because I made money doing that. And then by that time, Freddie Jackson came out. Freddie was cold. And I still at that time could not do all the runs. And I wasn't an exciting singer. I was just a really good singer. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's just focus on this hair thing. Let's get hair going. Let's build us a business. That's where I kind of shifted to. Talk about dreams deferred. So a few years went by, and I hadn't done anything with the music. Now, my family had a family friend that we'd known since before I was born. Larry Ball. Shout out to Larry Ball, Tony Ball, the Ball brothers. Um, when we lived in Chicago, my my mom and her siblings would do stuff with the Ball brothers. And then when we were here in California, they would do stuff with him, with Larry Ball. Larry Ball was a bass player. Actually, he played bass for Smokey Robinson for years and was his MD, and did some production for him and all that kind of thing. So Larry had become the guy who had a home studio, but it was professional. He had all the gear and all the stuff, all it hooked up. And we had gone over to his house and recorded all kind of stuff. My uncle Randy had produced some music that we recorded over at Larry's house, and so I was familiar with his setup. So this is years later. I'm probably in my early 20s now, 22 maybe. A few things have happened to me in that time. I gave my life to God, started becoming a Jesus follower, still a Jesus follower. I rock with Jesus. Um, and I stopped singing R&B. I went through that phase, that unintelligent phase, that super zealous, unbalanced, yes, I said all of that phase where I'm a hot firecracker for Jesus. And anything that ain't Jesus and ain't God is the devil. I had a girlfriend turned fiance. Her and her family owned all the VIP record stores. Shout out to VIP record stores. Her father owned one in Compton. They were the Anderson brothers, and she would come to the house every night with new music because she worked there. And I'd be like, "No, we ain't listening to this. Like, we're not listening. Bring me the gospel stuff. We ain't listening to this." Problem was, at that time, gospel didn't have a real diverse sound. It all still kind of sounded, churchy, and a lot of antics and a lot of emotion. It certainly didn't have an R&B presence to it, or a contemporary presence to it. Didn't have any of that. You had the Winans, and I had gotten hit to a group called Commission. Commission was probably the most urban gospel I had ever heard, and I was like, wow, and I fell in love with them. And so I was, stuck. Couldn't listen to R&B no more. My own. I had thrown away cases and cases of music, just throwing it all away. I was crazy. I was just young. I didn't know. I didn't understand the word. I just understood what church had always said. And a lot of things that church say don't align with the word. Y'all dig that out for yourselves. So, but a resurgence came. Like, you know what? I think I wanna sing again. And so I'm about 22 and I get this opportunity to do some music with Larry Ball. It would be now by now I've recorded in the studio with the Phillips singers and I've done some stuff. So I know what that feeling is like. I know what that looks like now. I'm ready. But this was my moment to do my thing, a song I wrote, and all that kind of stuff. And so I recorded a song called He Lives. Um, Look at the sky, you see the birds and fly. Then there's the moon shining so bright. The sun in the sky, it has an awesome gleam. That's how I know he lives. It was a nice song. It was cool. It had a fantastic bridge on it. Larry Ball put a crazy bridge on it, just crazy. But again, this was pre-digital era. This was pre-internet. So a cassette, because cassettes were still hot. CDs were just coming at the time. So it was really expensive to press up a CD, but it was also expensive to press up a cassette. And I only had one song on this cassette. I didn't even have a B-side. It was just one song. Did the song, and took me about 6 months from beginning to end to do the song. First of all, I had to pay Larry. Um, I had to pay to get the song done, the artwork and all that stuff. And then that song sat in the garage. I didn't have any connections. I'm this fish out of water singing gospel music. My voice doesn't sound like gospel music. Doesn't sound like the church. I still got this golden, smooth Luther Vandross sound. I had started attending a church in Compton, Tower of Faith. Shout out to Tower of Faith, Pastor Reuben Paul Anderson, Sr. And at the same time, I got turned on to, pause, to an artist named Daryl Coley. Shout out to the late, great vocal acrobat himself, Daryl Coley. This dude could run himself around himself. His runs and the way he kind of wove himself in and out of major and minor notes was insane. And I was enamored. I was like, oh, because he could sing really pretty. He was classically trained, so he had an operatic type of sound. But then he would roll off into this churchy run stuff, and I'm like, oh my God. So what I learned was, I became a Daryl Coley student. So much so, I would listen to his music every day. I would sing every song over and over and over and over and over. But I learned that some of the runs he did, I really couldn't do because I did not have natural vibrato. I had developed vibrato. So singers who have natural vibrato are the ones whose voices wiggle. They have the ability to do faster, smoother runs because the tremolo in their voice rolls. So they can do, oh, they can do all that. And I'm missing notes in there. They won't miss them. And I was like, wow. So there would be songs that he would do where he would do different types. He would do spatial runs. Believe me when I I say that to you. That was me all day long. I was like, oh, because I too was classically trained. Um, so I started developing a vibrato, and it would allow me to do a lot of Daryl Coley stuff, but some of his stuff I still could not do because his vibrato was too fast. His runs were too fast and too smooth. And but I would go around singing Daryl Coley stuff and singing my stuff and all that, singing songs that I'd written or songs that my mom had written. But there was no traction. I still was out of water, a fish out of water. I'd go sing at the midnight musicals. They would look at me like, "Mm." And then afterwards, women would come up to me and be like, "Oh my God, your voice is so pretty." Like, oh, hey, what's up? I was for those moments when I was single, I met quite a few women at the church, but I could never sell no tapes. And looking back, it was cheesy. I can admit that. The bridge was dope, but the song in its entirety, the sound of it, because even then, the sound of that song back then did not say gospel. Larry Ball was not a gospel musician. He was a R&B, pop, jazz bass player who knew his way around the bass like it was nobody's business. But gospel was not really his thing. And to be fair, at that time, gospel really wasn't my thing. So he appropriated his style to a song I wrote. I wrote it, he produced it. I didn't imagine it going the way he did, but I didn't really have, at that time, I wasn't a producer, so I didn't have a real working knowledge about what the song should sound like. I just felt like Larry's gonna hook it up. And I never fell in love with the song. I would listen to it, trying to like it. I think I performed it once or twice live. I I just I didn't like it. Um, this is a fun fact. While we were recording the background vocals for the song, um, I had my friend Andrea Lowe, shout out to Andrea, my mom, Dr. Gloria, shout out to Dr. Gloria, and myself doing background. So we're in this hallway at Larry's house doing the backgrounds, and I'm a crazy vocal arranger because I arranged all the vocals. So I'm a crazy vocal arranger, and I had us doing this segment at the very end of the song where we had to sustain this this long harmony part, and it was a crescendo, it was a build up, and at the end, as it's resting, he lives in 3-part harmony. At that moment, boom, my mama fainted. Now we were in this hallway together, so it's tight, but she passed right out on that, holding that last note. Um, you could hear it in the recording, but once we edited, you couldn't hear it. But he faded it out. But it was crazy. So the single, the tape, the cassette, the box of 100 that cost me $1,000. Wrap your mind around that. $1,000 for a box of of cassettes. I'm sorry, not $1,000, $700. That's what it costs. I'm old. I don't forgot. 700. Still, I never made that money back. Altogether, I spent over $1,000 on the project. Now that's nothing. Back then, that was everything for a 22-year-old. So I would spend time still being a wedding singer. I was totally focused on hair. And my boy Ruben Anderson Jr., shout out to Ruben Anderson Jr., one of the most phenomenal drummers I've ever worked with, dope producer. He and I co-wrote and co-produced the title track to my first album, Getting Clearer. Ruben says to me, Steve-O, because he used to always call me Steve-O. Steve-O, what you gonna do, man? Because by now I'm using Stephen Wayne as the moniker. He said, "What you gonna do, man? Let's do some music." I'm like, man, I don't know where to start. So I've moved from LA to Pomona, to the Inland Empire. I moved to Pomona, and I met a guy named Jimmy who had a studio in Pomona. Jimmy Hot Tracks. Shout out to Jimmy Hot Tracks in Pomona. And everybody knew who he was. I was like, oh, okay. And he had reasonable rates. So I said, Jake, who used to call Ruben Jake, let's book some time at Jimmy Hot Tracks studio. And we'll come up with something. Because I was writing songs. I had a little keyboard that could kind of record stuff. So I was writing songs. But I wasn't a real piano player. I could play enough to write the songs. I said, man, we need a keyboard player. And he said, I know just the dude. I said, who? Craig Brockman. Shout out to Craig Brockman. You owe me money. I remember I said that to him once on MySpace because I don't think he knew who I was. He was like, nigga, I don't owe you nothing. What you talking about? You owe me money, Craig. So, so he introduces me to Craig Brockman. Craig's living in Pasadena. Craig is still in high school. And I was like, okay. But I heard him play and I was like, oh my God, this boy is bad. And he was bad. He's still bad. Does a lot of stuff with Mervin, with the Mary's husband, Warren Campbell. Does a lot of stuff with Layla Hathaway. He's written a lot of stuff with her. Just some of everybody. He's a big deal. But then he was just a kid. It's like I always connect with these guys when they're kids, and then when they get older, they forget about the first dude who was putting money in their pocket. I'll get to that later. So Craig was like, yeah, man, let's work. And then simultaneously, I started doing like his sister's hair, and so it was a whole little business thing, right? Well, we still needed money because as much as Jimmy was the cheapest in town, Jimmy wasn't cheap. And back then, if you didn't have your own studio, you was at somebody else's mercy at the hourly rate. And the hourly rate could kill you if you didn't know what you was doing, and we didn't know what we were doing. At that point, Craig hadn't produced anything. Ruben hadn't produced anything. I hadn't produced anything. I just had stuff written, and I like what I didn't write, I would sing out, and then Craig would pick it up, and oh, okay, cool. So my best friend at the time, Al Hess, shout out to Al Hess, owner of the restaurant that's in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Shout out to Al Hess though. Al was my best friend at the time. He was also a hairstylist, and he was always like, man, when you get ready, I got you. I'll back your dream. So I was like, all right, let me see, my brother is real about it. And sure enough, he was. So me and him together partnered and would fund the studio trips. Problem was, we had no direction. We did not know what we were doing. And I didn't know that once you got it into the studio, Jimmy was just an engineer. Now, he was a producer, but you weren't paying him for that. So he would sit there. This dude looked like somebody that belonged to Prince's band. He was tall, super athletic, had a long, I don't know if it was a Jerry curl, I don't know what it was, but a long tail in the back. And this is after that look was gone. He looked like he could be ready for the world's cousin. But he kind of reminds you of Prince and Jimi Hendrix mixed together with a little ready for the world. But he was cool though. He was a cool guy. Well, we get in there and Jimmy's like, all right, so what y'all want to do? I'm like, huh? we all looking at each other. So we burned the first session 2-3 hours. It was nothing. We fiddling around with stuff. Ding, 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 ding. Craig playing on the keyboard, and he's like, "Oh man, you nice on the keys." But that's it. He had a drum room. Jay would jump on the drums for a little bit, but we didn't have any direction. It took us a couple of sessions to even figure out the direction we were going to go in with a song that I wrote. And so I wrote the song, and Craig started playing, and we found something. It was real pretty, real melodic. We never finished it because two things happened. One, see, I would have to always drive from Pomona to Pasadena to pick up Craig when Ruben, who was coming from, at the time, heck, Ruben lived in South Hills, like near West Covina. He would sometimes go get him and bring him. But if Ruben wasn't available, I would have to go to Pasadena and get him. So on one occasion, I drive to Pasadena to pick up Craig. I get to the house. Hey, Craig's not here. What? Oh, do you know where he is? Because we got a studio session in like an hour. Oh, he might be over at such. He might be over at the church because his dad was a pastor. We go over to the church, or I go over to the church. Nobody's there. I go back to the house. He wasn't there. You might where he might be, and this is way before cell phones. Now there were people who had mobile phones because that's what they call them because they were in the car, but most folk didn't have that. That was not a common thing. So he had a pager though. So I'd be at the payphone paging Craig. No response. I get on the phone with Ruben. I'm like, Ruben, where's this nigga at, man? He not. What? Call his house, man. Because Ruben knew his family. I did his sister's hair, but I didn't know his family. He knew his family because his church fellowship with Ruben's dad's church. So they knew each other. That's how they knew Craig. So I was just like, this is crazy. And Jimmy had a cancellation policy. You would lose some of your money with Jimmy. So that happened the first time. I never did find Craig that day. So I ended up with no session. Then it happened again. I'm running all over Pasadena, literally driving up and down the street looking for Craig. Craig is nowhere. So then I see his sister one time in the chair. I say, hey, where your brother? What's going on with your brother? He been ghosting me because we didn't use ghosted back then. Like, he been leaving me hanging. I've been losing money and not ever get this music done. Oh, I don't know. You know, Craig, he's young. I don't know what he be doing. Okay, she's no help. So I finally get Craig on the phone. Like, Craig, dude, you've missed 2 sessions. What's going on, man? Oh, my bad. Sorry, man. I just forgot. What? I think Craig was smoking back then, but I don't know. So we tried one more time. And before I even went to Pasadena this time, I called. Craig was not home. And his mama said, yeah, he's going to be gone for a little while. He went somewhere with his dad. So now we've burnt money. Ruben started going through some personal things with his dad, and the studio world just fell apart. I had nothing to show for it. One song that was not finished. Good song, but not finished. And it was good because Craig could really, really play. So he had buttered it up real nice. Cap Clothing, aka Cap LA, aka Knowledge and Persistence. Established in 2018, Cap is a clothing company based out of the Los Angeles, California area. And this is around the time that commission is really, really getting big. And this is also around the time that Fred Hammond, shout out to Fred Hammond, shout out to FKM, Fred, Keith, Marcus. Marcus, that's the homie. Marcus Cole. Shout out to Marcus Cole. This is around the time that Fred went solo for his first album. He hadn't left Commission, but he had done his first album, first solo album. So I'm I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm looking at Fred doing his thing. I'm looking at Commission doing their thing. They're signed to a label, so I know because I became an encyclopedia. I became a research guru for all things gospel music industry. I had the books. I would read all the jackets. I knew who produced what, who wrote what, where they recorded everything. I would call some of those studios, Studio A in Detroit. I would call there all the time just to see what their rates were. I wasn't even in Detroit. But I wanted to talk to the people who was on that record, who did the engineering and all that. I was deep. So when Fred put the single, the solo album out, my stepfather and I started talking about bringing Fred Hammond to the Inland Empire for a concert, not Commission, but just Fred Hammond. And I reached out to what I think is his management company, because back then on the CD jacket they would put the management company's contact info. So one day I call the number, and Fred Hammond answers the phone. I'm so shocked because I know it's his voice. I'm so shocked. I almost couldn't speak because at that point, Fred had become my muse. He and I sounded a lot alike. Very similar sound. People would say, "Oh, you sound like Fred Hammond and Donny Hathaway." I'm like, yeah. Um, and I liked Fred's voice, and I loved Commission. So I'd always imagine myself singing with Commission. I'm like, yeah, you gonna sing. I would have dreams about it. You gonna sing with Commission. So Fred answers the phone. Hello? Not, because at that time, he had started Face to Face Productions, but he hadn't started it then. So I think it was just Fred Hammond Productions or Fred Hammond Ministries or something. But he didn't answer the phone and say Fred Hammond Ministries. He just said hello. I said, hey, may I speak with Fred Hammond? I knew it was him, but this is Fred. Who is this? He was very gruff, very curt. And I was like, okay. He got a little funk on it. So I said, my name is Stephen Wayne, and I'm calling because I got your number thinking I was calling your management company off your CD case, and I wanted to talk to you about booking you to come out to the Inland Empire. Now I lived in Rancho Cucamonga, so come out to the Inland Empire in California to do a concert. He was all right. Well, what's your budget? And I said, well, we haven't gotten that far yet. We're trying to find out what your rate is and da 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 da. He's all right. Well, usually my rate is kind of centered around whatever the budget is. Like, oh, okay, cool. And then went into the details of what that looks like and all that. So we're talking, and it's like, well, hey man, while I got you on the phone, I just want you to know I'm a huge fan. He's like, oh, thanks, man. He warmed up a little bit, but he was still kind of dry. And I said, hey, do you mind if I call you back? We can talk more when I get more information from my partner. And he said, yeah, you can use this number. Call me back. Because I would later find out, years later, that during that time, they was broke. They had all them records out, but they weren't making no real money. They was broke. So me calling him and him being responsive then to a stranger was like, yeah, he needed that. He needed to say yes to people who called and said they wanted to book him. But in that time, I didn't know that. Had I known that, I might have came at him a little different. So I would start calling Fred on a pretty regular basis and just talking. After a while, he stopped asking about the concert thing because we stopped talking about it. Me and my stepfather stopped talking about it. But I took it as an opportunity to build a relationship with Fred. And so he would let me know when Commission was going to be coming to town. And at the time, I was attending Loveland Church in Fontana / Rialto. Shout out to Chuck Singleton, the great Chuck Singleton. I hang out with him now sometimes too. Um, and Chuck was having them come out, and they had come out before. So they'd been to Loveland before. So I had already seen him in concert once there. But this time, Fred had put this album out. And so he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna be at Loveland on this day. Why don't you come to the sound check?" All right, oh, cool. Well, fast forward, or let me rewind. Before that, when Commission went through their upheaval and Michael Brooks and Keith Staton left, and they picked up Marvin Sapp, they did this showcase at I forget the name of the theater, but it's in Leimert Park. It might be Crossroads Theater. It was a theater that people did plays at and concerts, that kind of thing. They were doing this showcase for A&M Records because they were getting ready to go a little bit more mainstream. So I had talked to Fred. It was just funny. I had talked to Fred and well, I had talked to him and I wanted him to hear something that I was working on. So this is around the time where me and Craig and Ruben were working on this song. And I let Fred hear the song. Well, we had worked on it, and by now, I'm done with Craig, and Ruben and I aren't doing music together at the moment. Craig has disappeared off into the wind. So I said, "Hey, Fred, I want you to hear something." So I put the phone to the tape player because it was still a cassette, and I let him hear it, and I'm like, I'm all full of joy because I'm thinking, Fred Hammond is listening to my music. This is gonna be dope. Maybe he's gonna be like, "Oh man, I should work with you." So I pick up the phone and said, "What you think?" He said, it was mostly distorted. I could hardly hear it. It was all distorted. And he said it like I could imagine that's how he was looking when he said it. I was like, "But there's that gruff thing. He could be real interesting sometimes." So I was like, okay. Now in my mind, I'm thinking he's gonna say, "Hey, turn it down a little bit and then let me hear it again." He was like, "Well, all right, man. Look, I'll talk to you later." And that was that. So then I called him because it was never Fred calling me. I would call him. Uh, Hey, Fred, it's Steve. Hey, Steve, what's happening, man? Just calling, checking in, seeing what's going on with you guys. Oh yeah, well, you know what? We're doing this showcase. Um, and by now, I've done this. I'd already done that song with Larry, so that was already done. So I had a box of those, and so I'm thinking, okay. Fred says, "Hey, we're doing this showcase for A&M Records at Crossroads Theater in Leimert Park. Why don't you come to the sound check and I'll get you backstage. You can meet the guys and da 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 da." I was like, "Cool, cool, cool." So when I got there late, so I didn't get a chance to meet the guys. But I went in, enjoyed the concert. Concert was amazing because they did some, and they actually did an EP cassette of songs that they did at that event because they flipped a few songs. They were all commissioned songs, but they flipped them. They had Marvin recorded on them. Oh man, I hate that I lost that because that cassette was dope. Fred, if you're out there listening, Marvin or Marcus Cole, run me that. I need that cassette. It was dope. And it was kind of like their introduction of Marvin Sapp to the group and to the fan base because right after that they did something with Carmen. They did this live thing with Carmen, the gospel circus performer. He was different, but they did a live thing with him, and that's where they did the live version of "I Am Here," written by Mitchell Jones. I told you I'm a historian of commission, and that's where we really get the introduction of Marvin Sapp because he comes in at that end where Keith Staton would be doing that end part and just destroys it. And his voice was just like Keith's voice was great. He has a very unique sound, but Marvin Sapp's voice was like something else, something different. So I get there, I enjoy the concert. They going off, it's packed. They going off in there. I'm like, wow, this is lit. although we didn't use that word back then. And after the concert, their backstage is upstairs in the back of the theater in this like room that's outdoors. So you have to go outside the venue and then go up these outside stairs, and then there's this area that has a balcony and all that. They're all kind of hanging out at the balcony. And I'm like, Fred, what's up, man? It's Steve. He's like, hey, Steve. I'm thinking he's gonna say, hey, come, let him through. He didn't do that. So, because to this point, I had not met him. We'd done all our talking on the phone. I'd never met him in person. So, but he knew it was me. And so, or at least, I'm assuming he may not have, but I had those cassettes. And he and I had already talked about the fact that I had worked with Larry Ball. He knew who Larry Ball was. And so, because Fred was a bass player, Larry Ball, bass player, and Larry Ball spent a lot of time in Chicago. So Chicago, Detroit, they knew each other. So I took that cassette. I said, hey, I got something for you. And he said, throw it up. So I threw it up, threw it right to him. Bam, he called. He said, all right, I'll let you later. I was like, cool. I'm like, dang, didn't get a chance to go chill with the guys. See, that's what you get for being late. So fast forward, another year goes by. I've talked to Fred a couple more times, but then that well kind of dried up. And the last time I talked to him, he let me know they were coming to Loveland. I was like, oh, or coming back to Loveland. I said, cool. I said, he said, yeah, come to the sound check. I'll make sure, that they let you in for the sound check. Because although Loveland never charged for their concerts, but that still didn't mean you could just get in there at any time. Now I was tight with leadership. Me and Chuck were cool. We were friends. So there were places I could go that some people couldn't go, but that didn't mean that everybody was going to let me in and everybody recognized me. They knew me as a singer because I would sing from time to time in Loveland. But I get to the sound check, me and Jake, and a few other folk that were with us, and we all go in. Before we went in, Marvin Sapp, this is the first time I met Marvin Sapp. Marvin Sapp is outside and they're talking about the Bulls and the Pistons. And I start clowning with him about the Bulls because I lived in Chicago. So I was rooting for the Bulls. And me and Marvin Sapp going back and forth. He was super cool, super down to earth. And I was like, okay, that's what's up. Because, we think that every entertainer that has star-like, celebrity-like status are above the clouds. A lot of them really aren't. A lot of them are not. And then a lot of them are. So we go in and we're going to the sound check. I see Fred sitting over by himself, and he's sitting on the front row while they're still doing sound check and still setting things up. And by now, I'm a sidestep for a minute. By now, I had done some work with Norman Hutchins. Shout out to Norman Hutchins. My friend Al, his sister was working on some music. And so me and a couple other people did some background singing for her, and she opened for Daryl Coley. I got to open for Daryl Coley because she asked me to do background for her. Oh, that was a dream to see him in person to do his thing. I'm like, wow, this dude is killer. So I had done some things. Well, Norman Hutchins was supposed to open that commission concert. And by now, Norman had let me back up. Al's sister's boyfriend was managing Norman Hutchins. So they're all there and there's something going wrong with sound. Now, again, I was younger. I didn't understand all that I understand now about what happens when you're overseeing an event, because now I have overseen hundreds of events. My production company has put on a lot of musical events. I've had to sit in Fred Hammond's seat. But remember, he invited me to the sound check. It's at my friend's church because I'm no longer a member of Loveland, um, but I'm still affiliated. I'm connected, and I'm still friends with the pastor. So I get there. Jake, Ruben Anderson Jr., him and the people that the rest of the folks was with us, they all chilling in one space. I say, I'm gonna go over here and talk to Fred. So I go over to Fred, and he's sitting on the front row, and he's shouting out some instructions to the guys, the tech crew that's setting things up. And Dawkins were now a part of their group because this is after they've dropped number 7, that album number 7, which was to me their best album. But they added several. Eddie Howard, shout out to Eddie Howard, that's my guy in Florida. He replaced Michael Brooks. Max Franks replaced Michael Brooks, but Eddie Howard became number 7. He became the 7th member of commission during the number 7 album. Just, it was so dope. That album was just fire. Still is. And behind the scenes, the Dawkins brothers, Eric and Anson Dawkins, had also joined the crew and were doing a lot of background singing and co-producing and co-writing and playing percussion and doing synth, auxiliary synth. So they're all up there setting stuff up and doing their thing. And I'm like, this is dope. So I'm walking over to Fred, and in my mind, I'm thinking he gonna welcome me with open arms. We're gonna sit down and talk while he's doing his thing. But I decided not to sit next to him because I just felt like he's doing his thing. And I wanted to see if he was going to invite me to that space. So I came and sat right in the row behind him and a seat next to him. So I said, hey, Fred, it's Steve. Hey, what's up, man? But he said, hey, what's up, man? And he had his hands up on the seats, right? And he he kept shouting out instructions and because they was really trying to get stuff together. And so I was like, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna wait till there's an opportunity to say something. I was like, I'm just sitting there. I'm looking over at my people, and they looking at me, because Fred's posture was like, it was almost rude. It was like I wasn't even there. And I said, hey, how's it been going, man? How's the new album doing? You're talking about his solo album, because now he's dropped another solo album. And I was like, how's the new solo album doing? And everything's going. I said, hey, he's kind of mumbling because he's focused on what he's doing. I said, where's Transformation Crusade, man? They performing? He's like, nah. I said, how's the record doing? That was the rap group that he had produced, Transformation Crusade. They were kind of cheesy though. He was like, man, they can't tour, man. You can't tour. You can't sell no music. You can't. People don't know who you are, because there was no real radio back then for that. And I'm like, man, he's giving me these like one sentence answers. It's just very short. And by now, Fred and I have had full conversations on the phone, but it wasn't like we talked every day or every month, but every time I would call, he would talk until this moment. Because now I'm feeling some kind of way. I'm feeling like I want to hit this nigga in the back of the head. I'm like, hey man, you invited me to sound check. Why you being rude? But I didn't know then what I know now. Now, that doesn't mean that how I felt wasn't still validated, because he was very curt, but I get it. Fred and I are a lot alike in that respect. When I'm focused on the task at hand, sometimes I can be curt. And so I often reflect back to that moment in an attempt to not be so curt, or to not be curt at all, because it's an unattractive thing. Sometimes it gets the best of me, sometimes I overcome it. But in that moment, he was very short. very dismissive. And I sat in the seat hoping that he was going to say, "Hey man, come on, come up here." He never said that. I was like, wow, okay, so this is what it is. And after that, I stopped calling Fred. I still love the music. I'll never not be a fan. I stopped calling him. I felt a certain way about that. And it wasn't just that. There were, phone conversations. We would have dialogue, but he was always curt, always dry. Like he was always irritated. And again, not knowing then what I know now, he probably was. They were struggling. He had a child, he had a wife. I know what it's like to have a young child and a wife and struggle financially. I know what that looks like. And so I was like, man. But back then I was just in my feelings about it all. Um, but I'm telling you this because my musical journey, my muse, when I became or thought I was becoming a gospel artist, my muse was Fred Hammond. But I was so turned off by how the engagement with him happened that I just was like, you know what? Forget it. Just forget it. I don't know what's going on. I didn't see a lane for music. I didn't see a path. At Mike Henry's Barbecue Company, we are passionate about delivering not just the best food, but the best experience. Nestled in the heart of Rancho Cucamonga, our mission is to treat every guest like family, offering mouth-watering barbecue that's slow cooked to perfection and served with a smile. From our tender brisket to our savory ribs, each dish is crafted with love and attention to detail. Our dedicated team goes the extra mile to ensure every visit is memorable, blending friendly, attentive service with a warm, inviting atmosphere. At Mike Henry's Barbecue Company, we don't just serve food, we serve happiness. Al's sister ends up working with this producer who was he had a home studio, and by now the home studio had started to transition over into the digital world. If you had a keyboard that was a workstation, that meant that you could sequence and build all your music in that keyboard and transfer it to a computer. And so, or transfer it to a 4-track or 8-track recorder that had a cassette in it. So I met a guy named Derek, and because of Al's sister, she was working with him. And Kirk Franklin had just come out and just kind of blown up. And I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Vicky Latalade, or Latilade, was the owner of the record label that Kirk Franklin was signed to. And this guy Derek knew her. She's a local person, California, Southern Cal person. And I had seen her around, but didn't know that she was who she was. So Derek is putting together his own version of Bad Boy Records. No Diddy. With a bunch of artists that he's going to then take to her and sign. He's trying to get his production company signed with this roster of artists that he has. His production was clean. Sounded a lot like the old school Michael Brooks production. It was very robotic though, because he used a Roland W30 workstation keyboard to record everything. And he was trying to do his thing with that. And so I'm feeling hopeful again. I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, we're gonna work with him. We're gonna do this. So, of course, though, he's not drafting artists. You have to pay. So no problem. I said, okay, cool. I can pay. I can afford that. He had a nice little 3-song package that he was doing, and what you wrote the songs. You give him your song idea, and he would produce it, put his little touch on it, and then his goal was to shop the package of these 3 artists he had. He had me, he had Mel, which is Al's sister, and then he had one other artist. I can't remember who the other artist was. He was going to shop us to Vicky. So we did the stuff. I'll never forget this. He didn't have a home studio. He had a room studio. He lived with his parents, and in his room, he was a musician at West Angeles, one of many of their crew, because they had back in the '90s they had the crew. Um, he he was living at home with his parents, so he had his little studio in his room. So you'd have to go in his room and sit on his bed and just, wait, and then you'd go in the bathroom. He had his own bathroom. You go in the bathroom to record the vocals. It was an experience because by now I'm starting to develop an ear for production, for what I think is going to sound good. Now I've consumed so much music and analyzed the music that I now know this particular snare would sound great here. The rhythm of this hi-hat should be this or that. So I'm paying Derek, right? I'm paying him to do this music. Now he's got the hookup with Vicky, and I'm like, okay, we can do this. So we're doing the music. I've submitted some music to him, and now this was during the era when they would tell you to do a demo with 3 sounds: ballad, mid tempo, up tempo. So that's what he did. He put together, for me and Mel and the other artists, he put together 3 songs. Well, a couple of the songs that he did for me, I didn't really like them. I thought that they should have some different sound to them. And I would take Ruben Anderson Jr., I would take him to some of the sessions with me. So we'd be sitting there, and Ruben had a great ear for production, great ear for music by now. He's found his way as well. Because when we was in the studio with Craig at Jimmy's Hot Shots, none of us knew what we was doing. So I would say, hey Derek, I think that right there we should take the snare out, drop it for a minute. And he would look back, oh, okay. And then he wouldn't do it. And I'm like, wow. Then I would suggest other things. And so on the way home, me and Ruben would often talk about the fact that Derek doesn't listen to us. Like he wouldn't. And so Ruben one time said, man, I don't understand. You're paying him. He works for you. You should be able to tell him what you want and he do it because he's working for you. You're the one paying. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. But I didn't know that was my place then. I didn't know that realm of the business. I just thought you pay the producer, you shut up. Well, because Quincy Jones said that when Michael Jackson didn't want didn't want that on the song. What's the song? Dun, 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 dun. Don't stop till you get enough. Michael Jackson said he didn't want that on there because he didn't like it. He said it kind of messed up his vibe. And Quincy Jones told him, that's staying. You sing, I produce, do your job. So, but again, that's something I heard later. At the time, I just felt like, well, this is Derek's job. I'm paying him to do his job. I don't, if he say no or if he ignores me, it's because he's the producer and I'm not. And that still works in some relationships, some music creative relationships. But the best relationships are the ones where there's collaboration, where there's agreement, and where you trust that your artist has an insight on what they're trying to communicate because it's their song and you want them to be bought in. So if they're giving you some ideas, you should at least consider them because that's going to mean that they're going to be a part of the creative process, and then it makes an artist, a singer, really dial in more when they know that they're hearing a kick or a snare or a note or a run of some kind with a particular instrument that they contributed to. It makes them feel even more connected to it, and they really buy in. Derek was like, so a couple more times I would try. Hey, Derek, I've been listening to the song. We need to change this. He wouldn't do any of that. And he wouldn't say anything like, look, man, you sing, I produce. He wouldn't do that. He was just, oh, okay. But he wouldn't change it. I was like, wow, okay. And I didn't know at the time I had the voice. So I never been a punk, but I didn't know I could stand up and say, hey, man, look, I'm paying you. I want that different. You need to change that. I didn't know. I know now. So we finished with the package. And right after we finished with the package and he got everybody's stuff finished, the Vicky Connect fell apart. And I was like, "Hey, Derek, what's going on?" I would call him, "What's going on with the Vicky thing?" Well, by that time, Kirk Franklin had taken off, like taken all the way off. So, because the reason why we sing played on the radio for 2 years, or that album had been out for 2 years before it blew up. Because wasn't until the latter part of the second year that secular radio stations, R&B stations, started playing it in rotation. And that's when it blew up, and that's when he blew up. Had that not happened, Kirk Franklin would be another Ricky Dillard. Great for gospel, but that's it. Um, so, but shout out to Kirk Franklin because he's amazing. He is a revolutionary. And my homeboy's wife, Darian Briggs. Now, shout out to Bruce and Darian Briggs. She sings for him. So he says, Vicky's tripping. She's not calling me back. I'm like, oh. So now I'm like, well, shoot. I didn't spend this money. I got this package. I might as well shop it. Now, it was truly a gospel package. Problem was, I still was not a convincing gospel artist because as I had become a person who knew how to run and do some things, that still wasn't really my style. Um, and my lifestyle was more like a performance nuance singer. So I would get through the song just to get to the vamp so that I could just be myself in the vamp. And I do all kind of stuff, very Kimberell-esque, very jazzy, very smooth jazzy, very the runs that I would do were very unique. And that stuff didn't play well on tape. Still doesn't. I still struggle on tape. When I'm in the studio, I don't always like what I sound like in the studio, but then when I'm live, it's a different person. And I've had people tell me that, like, hey, you sound like a whole different person live. Like, yeah, I haven't been able to capture myself in the studio like I would like to. My last album that I did back in 2019 will be the closest I would come to that. So anyway, I said, okay, well, now this is all about my journey, my second and third phase of going through the creative path of a singer. And I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do. Now, while I was working on this, something unique happened. I opened my first salon, still doing hair. And I had a client who worked for Motown Records. And she calls me and she says, hey, Steve, I've got a friend that wants to meet you. And she wants to do an expose on your salon in this magazine she's working for. I'm like, oh, really? Now, this is my first salon. So I'm like super excited. And so she introduces me to LaShawn Peterson. Shout out to LaShawn Peterson. That's my homie. She also worked for Motown. Her Gerald Busby, the late great Gerald Busby, shout out to Gerald Busby and the Busby family. He was her godfather. She worked for Motown, and so for a while I started doing all these people's hair from Motown. Like I had 4 or 5 clients from Motown. All these people was driving from LA to come out for me to do their hair. So LaShawn says, "Hey, we want to do this spread in this magazine that me and DeMonica are working on." I said, "Wait a minute, DeMonica? You mean DeMonica, Good Girls DeMonica?" It's like, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "That's my homegirl. We used to work together back in the day at Fox Hills Mall at Bill Gamble. Shout out to DeMonica from the Good Girls. That's my girl." I'm like, "I've known her for years." She's like, "What?" So DeMonica comes and she's like, "Steve," and we just hugged like we had because we used to work together and we used to club together. We she was in a dance crew. I was a choreographer for a dance crew, so we were in the same circles doing a lot of the same stuff. Um, so her and DeMonica come to the shop and we go through this what they're gonna do, and they did this whole beautiful layout. It's a shame that to this day I don't have that magazine anymore. But they did a whole layout with a bunch of I did a bunch of models, and it was great. So in that time though, LaShawn and I become friends, and she starts to learn that I'm actually a singer. And so she's telling me rather about this guy named Oscar Fields, who shout out to Oscar Fields, who was one of the uh, upper level execs at Motown. She said, "I'm going to give you his number, and I'm going to let him know that you're going to be calling him. You need to take your package and go see him." I'm like, "Cool." So me and my stepfather, we go, we set up a meeting, and we go and meet with Oscar Fields from Motown. Now I'm thinking, all right, this is my first real label sit down. I've got a package. I got the ballad and the medium and the fast or mid tempo and the up tempo. I'm ready. I got, I'm a good looking guy. I've got everything I need to get. I'm well spoken. So we get there, and Oscar Fields brings us into his office and sit down, and we talking. And we learned that Oscar Fields was at the time over sales and marketing. The person who was over A&R was Steve McKeever. I believe that's his name. Um, that's who we should have been meeting with. But we were meeting with Oscar Fields. Oscar Fields listens to my stuff. He's bobbing his head a little bit. And he says to me, "You don't have a great voice, but you've got a signature sound. And that's a good thing. It's not great." Now, in my mind, I'm offended because I can really, really sing. But I didn't understand the fact that what I was hearing on the record, on my own record, and what I sing when I sing live sound like two different things. I hadn't reconciled that yet. So I was like, in my head, like, what this nigga talking about? I, I don't have a great voice. What? I'm getting tense. And he said, "The ballad, though, that's where you really shine. I can hear you in that ballad." He said, "These other two?" Mm. And he said, "Why didn't you just do a ballad demo?" And I said, "Well, I was always told that you do a ballad and a mid tempo and an up tempo." He said, "No, you do what you're good at." Hmm. Okay. I had never heard that before, but that made all the sense in the world. He said, "You do what you're strong, because that's what you're selling. You're selling yourself. You want to sell your best self." He said, "And this ballad is your best self." He said, "Now I can tell you got something with this ballad. These other two songs, they don't really work for you." I was like, wow, okay. Okay. And by now, that package of songs, I had gone out and performed those songs live. Jay even put a rap verse on the up tempo one. So I had been out and about in the community performing these songs, and I performed them well because I can really sing. But in the studio, I can't always seem to capture myself. And the tape is moving. You ain't got time in the moment to be impromptu. You got to know what you're gonna do and go in there and do it. Or at least that's what I used to think. So he said, you need to go back and work on putting together a different kind of package. Okay, that's advice from sales and marketing. So he goes out, comes back in the room with a big box. I don't know what he's giving me. He says, here's something for you to go. And thank you guys for coming. He gives me a box of all these cassettes, like all kinds of cassettes. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not sure why he gave them to me, but there's a plausible theory that I have now. So he gave me this box full of all these cassettes, and we left, and we're in the car, and I'm asking my stepfather at the time, and so how you think that went? He said, well, he he said, hold on to the fact that he said you've got something. You've got a signature sound. You need to find ways to expand on that. But I was still in my feelings. I was still raw. You don't have a great voice. It's like, what? Because I've been praised my whole life for singing. This is the first person to ever tell me that. And I was like, who do you think you're talking to? So, although, after that I would listen to the same music, and yeah, that stuff was whack. It didn't sound great. The ballad was, yeah, that was the best one. And now that ballad live, when I sang it, was a song my mom wrote. And when I sang it live, oh my God, I would kill that song. But you know, you'd have to experience me live to go, hey, who is this guy? So I'm looking through the box of cassettes, and I'm like, what is all this? And I'm noticing names that some of them I recognize. Eddie Murphy, because Eddie Murphy was signed to Motown at one point. A couple other people, and then I noticed some. It's like Mo Jazz, what's that? Well, he gave me some music that was getting ready to come out because Motown was getting ready to release a jazz wing of their label called Mo Jazz Records. I got invited to that too. I went to that too. The release of Mo Jazz. That was pretty cool. Um, but I was like, oh, they doing a jazz thing. All right. But at the time I didn't know what it was. It's just like, oh. But it was about 20 or 25 artists in this box. Most of the artists that were in that box, I would soon find out that they were artists who had been shelved by Motown. Meaning they signed them, they put money into them for them to record, put the album artwork all together, and then put them on shelf. Said, we're not gonna put you out. Labels do that all. They used to back in the day. They used to do that regularly, and for a lot of different reasons. But I was just like, what? So in my mind, I was like, why did he get this to me? And I was like, maybe here's one of my working theories. Maybe Oscar gave that to me to say to me, do you see how much good stuff you got to get through to even get to where we want to release you? Because there was some good music in that box. I listened to all of those things. Some of it was whack, but it was some good music, some good singers. I was like, man, wow. So when I see LaShawn, she said, hey, how'd it go with Oscar? I said, it didn't. I told her. She said, oh, so yeah. I said, oh, I'm gonna try. I'll try to get you a meeting with Steve McKeever, because he was the head of A&R. He would go on to be one of the top execs over at Hidden Beach, where he signed the late great Sonny Hawkins. Shout out to Sonny Hawkins and Walter Hawkins Jr. Or not Walter Hawkins Jr., Jamie Hawkins. My bad. Shout out to them. Sonny Hawkins was amazing. She did one album, one gospel album, and it was on Hidden Beach. But Hidden Beach would also be the label that would sign Jill Scott. I'm a music historian. So she said, yeah, I'm going to try to get you a meeting with Steve. In my mind, there were a lot of things running around. Number one, well, why didn't you just set me up with Steve to begin with? Because Oscar's a sales and marketing guy. He don't have nothing to do with. But the truth of the matter is, if Oscar had found that I had something that he knew was something, he would have gladly taken credit for discovering me and walking me. Come on, we need to go over here and meet Steve real quick. We need to talk. But I didn't present him nothing that made him go, wow. So that was running through my head when LaShawn was letting me know that she was going to try to connect me with Steve, um, and then the other thing that was running through my head was, for what? If Oscar Fields was right down the hall from Steve, and he felt like I wasn't worth even meeting the A&R people, this stuff, Steve ain't gonna want to hear this stuff. I need to go back to the drawing board. Problem was, the drawing board was expensive, and I didn't know anybody else that was producing music at the time. So, dream deferred again. I gave up on it again. I didn't want to work with Derek anymore, because Derek had known what happened with Motown. He knew that we were meeting with Motown. You know, he was very interested in that because he co-produced those songs, or he produced those songs. So he was like, oh yeah, well, let me know how that goes, you know. So when I told him what they said, he was like, well, we can remix a couple of the songs. We can flip them. Why don't you come back to the studio? We can. Nah, number one, I didn't want to work with Derek no more. I didn't like his get down. I didn't like his studio etiquette. I didn't really like his style either. His style didn't match me. And all his stuff sounded the same. Just kind of sounded like fast or slower versions of the same thing. And he was using one keyboard for all of his work. So, I mean, and don't get me wrong, the Roland W30 at the time was hot. It was expensive, so not a lot of people used it. But it was a dope machine if you navigated around it. It was kind of quirky, and I almost bought one a couple of different times. I was like, yeah, I don't know. But I didn't have a great experience working with him, so I didn't want to do it again. But I didn't know where else to turn, so I didn't do anything. I just dialed into my salon and just working more, and you know, I was a salon owner, a young salon owner, and it became my world. Um, I didn't have a lot of time for anything else. I was working all the time. Um, and music just became something I did on Sundays at church. And it was a sad period because in my heart, I really wanted to sing, but I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn. So a couple of years go by, and I meet a young man named Kennard Morris. Shout out to Kennard Morris. Kennard is a multifaceted musician, plays a bunch of different instruments, and Kennard had a home studio. But more importantly, Kennard was a producer, and he had cheap rates. So I needed somebody that had all of that. I needed somebody that had cheap rates, that had the studio, that could produce, and I wanted to check out the vibe to see if I could vibe with him, because now I know I want to tell you this is what I want, and I'm expecting that you are at least going to listen to me and honor my voice since I'm breaking the bread. So I met with Kennard. We start talking music and business, and we discovered that we have a lot of things in common. So I felt comfortable with Kennard. Kennard had the junkiest studio in the world. I mean, I'm surprised to this day that I never saw a rat run out of anywhere. His studio was in his parents' home in West Covina in the garage. So he had commandeered the entire garage. But the garage also had a million other things in it, old gym equipment and old TVs and boxes of stuff and dusty and dirty. It was a mess. And his little workstation area was, he had a rack of keyboards and all this stuff, but it was all a mess. And so we worked together, um, of establishing a rapport, and I would go over there and spend hours over there after work, um, working on the music. By now, I'd lost my salon. Um, that was tough. I lost my salon. It would be the only salon I would ever lose. I'd never lose another one, but I lost that one. And I'm spending like, I don't know, 10 hours at work, 10, 12 hours at work, maybe even 14 sometimes. And then I'm leaving there and going to West Covina. And I'm spending hours at the studio. Now, the first few months, I'm at the studio 2 or 3 times a week, and we're just really getting to know each other musically. So we were toying around with things, and by that time, I had started a group called Conversion. Um, it was me and about 6 other singers, and I was starting to play more. So we were starting to take live events, live gigs, and we move around the Inland Empire, and it was cool. It was really cool. Um, we could really sing too. Really nice group. Some great singers in the group. And I'm trying to go to Kennard's and do production based on the stuff that I'm writing for Conversion. And with Conversion, I had also found my sound at the time. It was like for gospel. I was like, okay. And we were getting really good response from the church. So I was like, okay, I think I've found my group, my niche. Here we go. So we start trying to produce this music, and the music is not translating the same. And I'm like, okay, this is not exactly what I'm looking for. What I would find out was that Kennard had a very specific style. He wasn't a full range producer. And while yes, he played a lot of instruments, but he wasn't a full range producer. So a lot of the stuff had a very similar kind of hip hop sound to it, and that wasn't really what I was looking for. By this time, Dawkins the Dawkins had come out. Shout out to my boy Eric Dawkins and Anson Dawkins. Dawkins the Dawkins had come out full blown, and they were doing their thing. Um, and they were like the true pioneers of urban gospel. Like even more than commit, they were more urban than commission. Like their stuff sounded like it was on the regular radio station. Um, they sounded like Silk and H Town and everybody. They sounded just like those groups. And I like that style for me, but I didn't like that style for Conversion. So I was trying to figure out, well, how do we do that? So I would let Kennard, I'm like, Kennard, listen to this, listen to that. And he would listen to it, but he could not seem to translate their vibe to our vibe for what we were doing. So consequently, we spent a lot of time in the studio and a lot of money. Kennard was cheaper, and by now it's all on me. Al has gone to the left, and I've gone to the right. We're we're back walking straight now, but there was a season when we were not walking together, and so this is all on me, all out of my pocket. Kennard was really cheap, so it worked out. But we hadn't finished anything. We didn't have any music done. We couldn't seem to lock down or focus and get any music done. We spent a lot of time in the studio to the point where Kennard and I had become friends. And we became friends in such a way where he stopped charging me. But we also didn't get anything done. And it was disheartening. I would spend a lot of time in the studio. We'd be working on stuff. And so by now I'm starting to look and see, like, okay, I need to be producing my own stuff. So I told him, I said, listen, will you teach me how to run all this stuff? And he was like, yeah, I'll show you some stuff. But I was always a person who could pick up anything that I saw happen multiple times. If you did it in front of me 3 or 4 times, I got it. So when he would be on the phone talking to whoever, it could be a girl or whoever, I would go play my song while it was queued up because now we're moving really into the digital age. See, I think Kennard was using maybe Cakewalk. Um, yeah, I'm almost sure he was using Cakewalk. So he's using Cakewalk, um, and I would press play, and then I would stop it, and I would go to a track, and I'd pull up a sound bank, and I would start messing with stuff, and he'd be like, "Hey, man, what you doing? What you doing? Stop that!" And I'm like, "Dude." After a while, it used to irritate me because after a while, I was like, "Hey, this is my stuff. Now, if you don't want me on your equipment, that's one thing, but this is my song." And I was like, "Okay, I see how this is gonna go." And respect to him, he didn't want nobody touching his stuff. I get it. And I to him at least, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had watched him enough to know what to do to not mess up the equipment. Even if I did mess up my song, it was my song. So I said, okay, that's it. I need my own thing. I learned enough to navigate. So my stepfather and my mom, at the time, they were married at the time, and they were pastoring a church. I was their assistant pastor. And we were getting ready to upgrade our sound system and all that stuff and get a new keyboard. So Kennard, he had come and joined the church, and several other young adult people had come and joined the church um, that were friends of mine. He was the one we used as the reference. He's like, I said, "Hey, which board should we get?" And he was like, "Well, your mom, because my mom was the person playing. She was the one playing, and she and I were the ones singing." He said, "Well, you could get a Kurzweil. Your mom would like the Kurzweil because it's really a nice piano with a lot of nice piano sound banks." He said, "But if you get the Alesis QS series, it comes with a standard version of Pinnacle." I'm like, "What? What is that?" He said, "Pinnacle is a sound. It's a software that comes with the bottom version or the base version of Cubase called Cubasis." Now, you had Cakewalk, you had Cubase. Um, Pro Tools had not really, really hit the scene yet like it did. Um, but Cakewalk was what a lot of people were using, and then a lot of people were using Cubase and a few others. There were several others. So I said, so now Kurzweil was clearly the better piano, but Alesis came with something that I could benefit from. So we purchased the Alesis QS8. It's still in my studio now because after we moved on from that, we moved on to a Roland series piano, electric piano, and I took the QS8. So, but at the time, the software came with it. So I got the software. I had a computer built. Kennard helped build a computer for me, and I started on my journey. Ruben would be one of the first people that I would produce something with because I'd invite him over and we worked and worked and worked. We worked on a track called Getting Clearer. That track is still cold to this day. You look at me like I'm a picture. Real old school R&B feel. Why do you stare Is it the color of my skin or what I'm wearing? Is it just my hair? Do you take the time to wonder what you really see? Yeah, but we did the song not for me. It had that doom, 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 doom. When you're down and out, don't know where to go, and nothing's going your way, and you're ready to check out. It's getting clearer, clearer. It's getting clearer. Oh, let me see if I can speak relevance to you. You went to school, got the degree, but now you're waiting for a job. Nobody will hire you. Don't you worry, it's getting clearer. Yeah. He left the house, she checked out. Relationship is kind of rocky, but you know it's getting clearer. Wow, it's getting clearer. Oh, it's getting clearer. Oh, my. It's getting clearer. Whoa, it just had a vibe, like an old school R&B vibe to it. And Ruben has a cousin named Erica King. Shout out to EK. She's in Houston. She's done stuff with a lot of stuff with um, Israel and New Breed. A lot of stuff with them, and been on tour with what's her name, Rihanna, and she's a phenomenal vocalist. She and I have put a single out together about 3 years ago called Electric Love.
It seems we've shared a glimpse that could be a moment or a lifetime opportunity. Do you agree with me? Yeah. Nod your head real slow if you feel me. Say yeah. Say yeah. If we're in a crowded room, but I know you see.
She's phenomenal. Well, back then she was just a teenager. And so Ruben was like, man, what we gonna do with this song? I was like, I don't know, man. He said, I got an idea. So he calls his cousin and said, hey, tomorrow, can you come over to Steve's house? And I known Erica since she was a kid when I went to their church. And so, because their moms are sisters. And so I said, yeah, come over. So she comes over a couple of days later and we let her hear the song. I still have a version of it. That girl killed that song. She's got this this real sexy vibrato, and it's just she's got a sound that's so unique. It's a shame that she's not out because Erica's sound is you ain't heard nobody sound like her. And we're trying to we were like, hey, Ruben and I were thinking we would become Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. I fell in love with production so much so that I was no longer even tripping out being an artist. I was like, I had found my lane. Here's what my day would look like. I would go to the salon at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, work till 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 on the weekends. Friday, I'd work till 10 or 11. Come home. My studio was consisted of the computer, one keyboard controller, two little raggedy speakers. That's it. No audio interface. It was just a card that went into the computer. So everything was plugged into the computer. It was very basic. But the sound that we generated from it was amazing. So I would come home and my studio was in my breakfast nook inside of my kitchen. And I would sit at that console and work until the sun came up. And then I would shower, get dressed, and go back to work. I do that every day for weeks, months. I couldn't wait to get home to work on the music. I'd be at work with music spinning through my head. And I found my feel. I found my vibe. So in my mind, I was thinking, I'm doing music every day now. I'm doing multiple songs a day. I'm cranking out songs. But they didn't have anywhere to go. So I'm like, okay. When Erica came and dropped the demo vocal on Getting Clearer, I was like, oh man, we gotta do an album on her, man. Yeah, well, that was the plan. And Erica was a teenager. She kind of did the Craig thing. She kind of disappeared, wouldn't show up for some of the sessions, and it was like, all right. I'm like, you know what, man? I'm gonna sing this song myself. So I recorded the song myself, and didn't do nothing with it for about 3 years. And then 3 years later, I put out my first album with the title track, Getting Clearer. By that time, I had produced hundreds of songs. I had a whole vault of songs. And I had the ability to actually yield different sounds, and everything didn't sound alike. I did not have one style I could appropriate to the artist, because by then I started working with some other artists, and that was a fantastic journey. Putting my first album out as SP, because I was trying to really now connect with the urban crowd. Urban gospel was finding its footing. Dawkins and Dawkins were still doing their thing, but they hadn't gained any real traction like Kirk Franklin did. So they were still just kind of in the church lane. But I was a historian, so I stayed up on all of them and all what they were doing. Commission had disbanded, and then the remnant of Commission went on to continue to do more stuff. But Fred had left, and it was the gospel scene was changing, and my ideologies about it all was changing as well. I had grown up in the Word, become more mature, not so overzealous, and my perspective was changing on what I should be doing as an artist. But my first album, my first record, Getting Clearer, was a great feeling. It was a really, really, really fantastic feeling. I'll get more into that the next time I talk to you. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this. I'm still a work in progress, and God has not finished what He's begun in me. It's getting clearer. Thank you for hanging out with me for this episode of Life Interrupts Us. You can see that in that segment of my journey from high school to adulthood, I got interrupted a lot. My music career was interrupted, railroaded, canceled quite a bit. So I hope that you'll see that if you're driven by something and the forces seem to be against you, don't quit. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. You'll find your lane. If you keep pushing, you'll find your lane. I'm Stephen Wayne, the storyteller. This is a place where storytelling comes to life. Stay tuned for another episode of Life Interrupts Us. I got way more to share. Y'all be good.